Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important 90 minutes of your day. Hello, I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador for today's show. And today's show's title is Division versus Unity. What do you choose? With me today are some of my fabulous co hosts Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator,
Hi, everyone. Oh, I better post this.
and Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Greetings and blessed love, beautiful people.
And today is the title, may not give you that impression, but we're talking about divide and conquer today and how it applies to you as an individual and how you might be able to understand it better. But I think for a lot of people, divide and conquer is something that they see out in the world, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that relates to them. But unfortunately, because divide and conquer is so well practiced in so many different shapes and forms, certainly with business and all the other things that go on a daily basis, these things are things that can kind of get into people's identity. And because there's maybe I should back up. Divide and conquer is a process. It's really based on something called the Hegelian dialectic. And some people describe it as problem, reaction, solution. Others describe it as thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's primarily the Hegelian definition. But it is one in which, for those that understand how to administer power, they know that you've got to take both sides of the coin. You've got to take not only the whatever side you're pro to, but also control the opposition to that. And by doing so, you create two trains of thought that are both corrupted, and they're corrupted to the destination. So both trains of thought are headed to the same destination. And for the most part, most people don't understand that. But when you get on a train of thought, that train of thought kind of bleeds into your identity because it's a group of people, and groups tend to have groupthink, and they
Wait, wait,
tend
wait,
to
wait.
identify
What do you
themselves in
mean?
certain ways.
What do you
Okay,
mean
go ahead.
get on a train of thought? Like I'm trying to imagine myself hopping this red and black train. Choo choo.
Well,
You mean when you embrace certain beliefs?
yes, but when
Join
you embrace
this
certain beliefs that have kind of a group of people
group
around them.
think.
So like for example, and I hate to use this one, but if for example you didn't like to put something on your face in the current circumstance,
Like a
you
lipstick?
might
Yeah, like
identify
makeup.
yourself. Yeah.
If you didn't want to wear makeup, like a lot of
No,
women don't choose to. No, 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 no,
something
no,
that's
no.
similar to a diaper, but
No.
but in that particular case, if
Let's
you
talk
were
about
to
it more
identify with that, you
historically.
might.
Let's talk about self-censorship.
Let's talk about censorship.
Well, let me
Okay,
try
no,
and
no,
get my
no.
point across here.
All right, all right. Without getting
But if
us
you
in
were to
trouble, right?
identify with that group of people, it would, like for some people, they would see that you didn't have that particular thing in the place that it's supposed to be, and they would say to themselves, "Oh, that's one of those kind of people." And over a
Uh-huh.
period of time, you might start to like just kind of fit into that group of people that aren't doing that particular thing. But in doing so, you've kind of identified yourself as a particular kind of person. And over time, that might bleed into how you identify yourself.
I have another
So
example of this, more
let's
more
okay,
historical.
try another example. All right.
Well, in the 16th century, when they first introduced forks into Europe, it was considered
Okay.
the tool of the devil, and so some people of certain classes would use forks and other people would refuse to use forks because they looked like a pitchfork. So,
Well,
so there was, so why
Okay,
I'm
that's
using
an
that as an
interesting one.
example of a groupthink that's easier to relate to, as opposed to groupthink that's already happening right now. Because if we're in it, if we're in that thought pattern, we may not be able to so easily, like, to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish, right? So we might not be identify that. But if you think about the 16th century, and there are two groups of people, and I think it was something I read in one book that there was Lutherans who would eat with a fork, but Catholics would not eat with a fork. And there was this whole division thing because these guys were Lutherans and they were obviously going to hell and obviously the devil's work. And then there were Catholics who would eat the proper way with your hand and a knife, none of this fork stuff, works of the devil. But if, like, think about this, there is no point to that. Like, what utensil you use for food, for eating, for feeding yourselves, whether you use your hand or you stab it with a pen, right? It doesn't matter. But yet there is this division and people died. Like, died because they were Lutheran. It wasn't necessarily about the fork thing, but the fork debate was part of that whole debate. So it even went all the way to your personal home.
Lionheart
Right?
Luke is helping us out big time. He
Lionheart
told us
Luke.
that the something what you put in your face is called face huggers, and he also says the fork thing is
Face
very
huggies.
interesting because he's playing the fiddle, and that's also used by the devil. Fiddlers couldn't be buried in hallowed ground. That's an interesting fact I didn't know. Yeah, talking about division right there, but I feel
Yeah.
we talk divide and conquer. So if some entities, some people, some clubs, whatever, are on the divide and conquer path, so let us be on the unite and liberate path. And I mean, examples for divide and conquer are plenty. Like, if you look at organized religion, if you look at nations, if you look at supposed differences in race, in skin color, in belief, in how we say, like social segregation, or economic levels within society. People use all kind of things to divide themselves from
Yeah,
others.
you know what? When I was a child, I remember one time I was going on summer vacation and we were all these kids, like 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, standing around waiting for the train to come. And my dad is like, don't be friends with that girl. She's the janitor's daughter. Can't be friends with the janitor's daughter.
Jiddu
And I thought
Krishnamurti, in one of his
very,
famous
very
quotes,
strange.
he points out that as soon as you call somebody other, whether it's like the other nation, other gender, other whatever, what it ultimately does is that it breeds violence. So violence is one of the results that comes from division ultimately. And
But explain, what do you mean? How violence? Just telling you that, I don't like the fact that you went to Jamaica and spent 15 years there in tropics, barefoot.
not sure
What?
that
You
example
were in
will-
Jamaica? Those
If you
Yeah.
divide yourself from if you separate
Jamaicans?
yourself from somebody else, you create a separation, which
Like
is
we
a
just did?
perception, which is a mind thing. You see, so, and all of
Because
those
we're
are
really all the
constructs.
same.
Those are mental constructs, that you put up. So, and then, the title is division versus unity. What do you choose? So, do you choose to focus on separation, on seeing that which is different? And if you go deeper into that perception, is that true? Like, if you really dig down to it, is there difference? Or if you focus on what unites you and what is the same, and if you're digging down there, can you find for each example that might that supposedly divides you, or that makes you separate from somebody or something else, is there something that you likewise can find that actually unites you and that puts you back down on the same page, so to say, with the supposed other? And if
Like we're all three of us are from different countries, but all three of us are wearing headphones and cotton shirts.
see it right there.
I can't say all three of us have long hair because, well,
Well, I think one of the things in regard to this um, is really that, and the way I say it is divided is conquered. And when we accept division, when we accept stereotypes of other people, when we accept expectations of evil or you know, kind of this understanding that the other side is the bad guy and we're the good guys, that we are really conquering ourselves. We're allowing ourselves to be conquered, because unless we've got a very good reason why we should be judging the other side or the other person or the other group of people, we're really allowing ourselves to be conquered.
So that's a constructive way of conquering. I'm hearing right there, or like that shines through, because conquering myself, mastering myself, overcoming the sense of division that there might be there. That's a different kind of conquering. That's not wanting to conquer somebody else or someone else, or to divide, but it's like, overcoming the I would say false belief that there is anyone else but that which is expressing itself through all of us at the same time.
Well, and I guess we'll kind of get into this in the next show, because we're going to be talking about this in further, but really harvesting the gold of conflict resolution. But the thing is that, like, when we choose to be divided, when we choose to take one side or the other, we're really diminishing our own awareness of what might be other possibilities too. And certainly the idea of the Hegelian dialectic is to really just give you a choice, but give you two choices that really deliver one ultimate outcome, which is what the other side wants, what the people that are instilling division want.
So giving us the two choices creates the problem, because some people choose this and some people choose that, and there's no unity. So then the problem, and then there's a reaction to the problem, and the solution comes forth. That is the solution that was envisioned before the problem was, but the division was created, and the problem, or the problem was identified, or created the problem before the problem was created, by creating an artificial division.
So isn't that an opportunity?
So,
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say that's problem, reaction, solution, but it's really solution, reaction, problem.
It's really plan, execution, reaction, solution,
result.
Yes, result.
I get what I want.
So isn't that an opportunity? Isn't in the division, which is duality, right? Which is saying, there's this and there's that. There's left and there's right, and there's up and there's down, and there's I don't know, there's Canadians, Germans, and Mexicanos, and there's all those, there's
You a Mexicano or an American?
¿Usted es una mexicana? ¿O no es mexicano?
No, I'm an Acapulqueño.
There you go.
Okay, so there's Germans, there's Polacks, and there's Acapulqueños.
See it right there. Anyway, so in the division, isn't that an opportunity, which certainly has its place as well? Because if there wasn't division, if there wasn't duality, then what would we come here to figure out? You see, like if all was perceived as unity, and if all was nice and rosy, and there was no duality, there was just oneness, then why would oneness limit itself and come here to experience what? To experience oneness? So that wouldn't be much.
So is Krishnamurti for or against division then? Because you just quoted that he was against division, but now you're saying that division is necessary in order to establish unity. Is that what you're saying?
No. I can't speak for Mr. Krishnamurti, but I was referring to one of his quotes, which says that any kind of separation is, I'm going to find a quote still for you, any kind of separation is breeding essentially violence, because you're separating yourself from anything else that there is. And truly, there is no division. But what I'm saying is that within this game of division, of duality, which obviously, by the amount of examples that we were able to come up with just in the last few minutes, is part of the reality that we're in, that we're finding ourselves in, of the perceived reality that we're, of the game, of the theater, of the movie that we're playing in right now. So I'm trying to point out then that within that duality and within that division, there's opportunity of perceiving that there is some players who are playing the divide and conquer game, that they're saying there is left and there is right, but that there's also, someone who can look through it and who can perceive that, and who can look from not within the game, but who can see, oh, there's a game being played and it's between left and right. And, I can take this side and that side, but I'm still, in the division thing. So, and the ability to see and to uncover and to unveil that there's something beyond the division, doesn't it require the game of division, of divide and conquer being played? Because if it wasn't being played out, then, probably it would be very difficult to see that there is a game there. And maybe it takes the duality for oneness to actually rediscover itself.
Well, I would say that the idea or the tactic of divide and conquer is one that employs a weakness that a lot of people have, and then they exploit that weakness. But I would say that in general, it certainly adds to the reason why we should be more aware of what is possible out there. But then I would say that, like, in regard to what Alfred Korzybski says, which I refer to a lot
Often.
here, what the
Especially
idea
the last
of
2 weeks.
human nature being one of, really, he describes it as time binding, but I would say it's just collecting experiences and learning from those experiences as individuals, so that there's really this opportunity to not just have 2 points of view, but have a million points of view, and learning from each of those points of view leads us to a much greater awareness. Yeah, we can have 2, and that's greater than 1, but, or 2 points of view are greater than 1 point of view, but really we should have a million points of view. And then, like, from that, we get an opportunity to not just choose one solution, but choose a million solutions, and then really be able to evaluate from a much larger and greater awareness, which is really the difference between scarcity and abundance. The scarcity mindset is what I would call another version of divide and conquer, where it's just there's a piece of pie. I'm going to take my slice of the pie, and if I get you to forfeit your side of the pie, then I get the whole pie. Whereas abundance says, "Oh, you want pies? We can have a million pies."
Or the one slice of pie can be divided among everybody.
Well,
I think there's just an infinite slice of pie if you think of abundance. So
I feel what you're hitting on, Mike, is that by camouflaging or by hiding our uniqueness, or by preventing people maybe on a larger scale to tap into their unique beingness and their I don't remember, I can't come up with a better word, their uniqueness basically, and standing into their own power through the divide and conquer process. People are being grouped basically in groups, in the left versus the right, in political parties, in nations, and they're held in those constructs, which are in the end mental constructs as well. Yes. They're led to through beliefs and through their mental processes that they're I'm this and I'm of that nation and I'm of that religion and this religion. They identify with that, so they're creating artificial identities with that,
right.
And they fall into those traps, or they identify themselves with those labels and within those boxes, so to say, and which makes it easier to be controlled. Because if you would have like millions of empowered individual beings who would realize that they are in essence divine, that they are spiritual beings as well as physical, emotional, and mental beings, then certainly you would have that lived diversity.
It's from the beginning, from very childhood that starts happening. Because why am I hearing an echo of my voice? I wonder. Interesting. Yeah. So in childhood, we're told to be good. You have to be a good girl. You have to be a good boy. You have to do this right. You have to do that right. You know what I mean? And then as we grow up, we're told, oh, if you don't do this, you're not a good boy. Right? So it's a trap that we are lured into as children. I want to be I want to be a good boy. I want to do the right thing. I want to help the disempowered, and I want to change the world, make it a better place. And those are all good ideals. But then as we grow up, we're presented with choices. Well, I believe this. Well, if you believe this, then this and this and this, which is not necessarily true. Like, for example, I would wear long skirts and I would say, oh, you're a hippie. And I didn't ever identify myself with a hippie. And I was confused. And it was just because of my skirt that they thought I was a hippie. I thought it was very strange, because there's a whole philosophy and belief system there that they're assigning to me based on the piece of cloth. You know what I mean?
So that's conditioning, right? So we're being conditioned on many levels, and consciously and subconsciously as well. And that's going back to what I tried to point out earlier. Like, if you would have just worn like your skirts the way you do, and nobody would have ever said anything, you wouldn't have had the chance to realize that there is conditioning. Whereas by them pointing out, oh, you're a hippie, and you're naming yourself, there's like, oh wow, there's some conditioning happening on with them. And then that could lead you to, okay, where have I been conditioned? And like, the progression.
I used to get angry. My conditioning was like, I'm not a hippie. I'm not dirty.
But you moved through the anger, right? So you were able to move beyond that, and you were only able to develop that and to move through that because the conditioning was pointed out to you, like sometimes in painful, sometimes in less painful ways. But it seems that life throws those lessons at us in order to work through them.
Yeah, I was offended for being called a hippie, because in my mind, again, conditioning too, I thought that hippie meant, you smell like weird stuff, and you're not clean, and your hair is dirty and things like that, which is not true either.
So one conditioned mind was hitting on another conditioned mind, and then the two conditioned minds were kind of like in friction with each other, which is what we see all over the place, right?
All the time.
So Shambhavi is enjoying her walk. I'm sure she's sending a big heart and a virtual hug. And Luke is bowing out. He said it's getting late here, and he will catch up later with the recording of the show. Thank you so much, Luke, for your input.
Well, in regard to that, though, because it's repeated over and over again, and that's kind of part of that conditioning. Before long, there's going to be a point where you're probably like, people are going to ask you who you are, and you'll say, do you understand what a hippie is? I guess I'm a hippie in some ways. And then, because they've used hippie so much, and they've associated so many things with hippie, at some point you just that becomes part of your identity. And now, because of either laziness or just the fact that it's been repeated so many times, you've adopted something that says, to some degree, I'm a hippie, and maybe it's because you're just like, okay, I see hippies as open-minded, but to you've said, okay, I'll just describe myself as a hippie, and it's because you think open-minded. But to everybody else that hears you say hippie, they might think you're dirty. They might think you're, come from a commune. They
smell like a patchouli.
Exactly.
And yet, once you're established within yourself, does it matter if somebody calls you an idiot, if somebody calls you a hippie, if somebody calls you a Acapulqueño, whatever? Because once you know who you are or who you is, then, does it matter what anybody else calls you?
I kind of like the word idiot, though. Because
But that's
apparently, go
okay.
ahead. Fine, go ahead.
No.
No, I gave up.
No, go ahead with the idiot.
No,
thing.
go do it. I'll talk about the idiot in a
Well,
minute.
all right. Well, so the thing is that you've basically agreed to a language that somebody else has put together, and meanings and definitions that somebody else has put together with a particular purpose in mind, that now we've got to like kind of go through the motions and kind of get tangled up in a definition and stereotypes and expectations and all these other things. We've tangled ourselves into this morass of traps and potential misunderstandings that lead to, like you said, conflict, because now we've grouped ourselves into, and even if we're just utilizing the word to make it easier for other people to understand, and maybe we're doing it for good intentions, the potential for us to have something bad happen is greatly increased, because now we're using somebody's language that they're utilizing to diminish or to steer people in a particular direction.
And where's
So it all comes down to language.
where's
it certainly is one of the pieces of the puzzle.
The worst thing is that if there's really nobody else, then it's like me, myself, and I, like calling myself names and being in conflict with myself. It's like my foot calling my hand an idiot, and then my hand takes a hammer and licks my foot. And so
wax. I think in North America it's wax, not licks.
Yeah,
like
licking.
In
Sorry.
Caribbean.
In the Caribbean, that means like to give somebody some lick. That means you hit them.
It's funny because to give somebody a licking is beating them, but licks the foot does not mean the same thing.
Thank you very much.
So I want to talk about the idiot. So the idiot used to mean somebody who was not interested in civic politics. Somebody who just wanted to live their life, not have anything to do with civic bullshit, politics, and just live independently. That's what an idiot used to be.
Well, obviously they didn't want those kind of people hanging around, so they had to diminish that ideal, huh?
Well, and over the years, somebody who's not interested in, I don't know, groupthink has been called an idiot. Somebody who does their own thing. But you know what's weird? In all the Norwegian stories, it's the Askeladden, the little ash boy, the idiot, who always wins the princess and gets half the kingdom every single time. And Askeladden is like Cinderella, but the male version. So it's basically, if you break down the word, it's a little ash boy. So it's usually the youngest child in the family, in the stories, right? In lore, it's the youngest boy, it's youngest of 3 boys. And he just like, he's stupid. So they don't give him any responsibilities. So all his job is to maintain the fire. And so he's always dirty and he fumbles around, he gives people back their money and treats like disrespectable people with respect. It's like a whole thing.
Very nice.
Very interesting.
Wow. I'm interested to find out why that hasn't gone more mainstream.
We have a whole book of Norwegian stories.
That legend.
It's not one legend. It's like thousands of legends in Norway. They're all about this little ash boy who is a fumbling idiot and who wins the kingdom.
But a fumbling idiot is not the same idiot that
Is
other
not
people
interested.
would describe as idiot. It's not
Maybe
the,
not.
not the moron, not the the guy that doesn't understand left from right and all that stuff.
You know the water of life story that I tell, and there were 3 brothers, and the 2 older ones, they had lunch, and the old man's like, give me half your lunch, and they were like, I need my strength. I have an important job. I have to save my mother's life. I can't give you half my lunch. Fend for yourself, old man. And then the youngest, the idiot, the quote unquote idiot, he was like, oh man, you're hungry. Here's half my lunch. You know what I mean? Like, obviously you need half my lunch because you're asking for it. And so that was the idiot that won the princess and half the kingdom in that story.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just goes to show how stereotypes and language and definitions matter.
So what do
And
we
you know what
choose?
else is interesting about Escaladen? He doesn't like, the Cinderella, she waits for somebody to save her, right? First is the fairy godmother that comes and solves her problems. Then the prince comes and solves her problems. With Escaladen is quite opposite. Nobody solves his problems. Nobody believes in him. Nobody, like, they might give him lunch, but they're not going to, say, in a lot of the stories, the lunch he gets is less good than the brothers get because there wasn't food anymore because it was not enough for him. You know what I mean? But yet he still succeeds on his own prowess. Dennis, you were saying
Interesting.
comments from the audience?
No, I haven't seen any. So what's your choice? What is it that you choose? Is it division
Well,
versus unity?
well, I was going to also say that, like, another example might be nationalism. Where like the Germans and the Polish, obviously.
Now you're going to step on toes.
Okay.
You have a Polak and a
like,
German right in the room with you.
Yeah, since we got these two
Who is the hand and who is the foot
face
now?
off. But the reality is, because I'm kind of
not sharing my lunch with him.
My heritage kind of comes from that, but it was before there was even like there was a Germany or a Poland. It was Prussia, and they were both part of that particular area. So, like, how is it that, like,
careful what you share say
the
next
same
there,
history,
boy.
You share the same history, but now you're two different because of some line that's been drawn between you, and that wasn't even a line that was drawn by Germans or Polish. It was drawn by English and French.
The Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was the Knights of the Cross.
Well, modern Germany and modern Poland was kind of put together by the Treaty of Versailles, which was really Americans, French, and English.
Yeah, but we're talking about Prussia, which was earlier. Prussia was established by the Knights of the Cross, the Hospitallers. It's weird. But earlier when I was talking about, we all wearing headphones, we're all wearing cotton shirts, I was looking at us and I was like, you know what, we're kind of look like we could all be related. Like, we all have this kind of brownish hair, we all have pale complexion, I think we all have blue eyes, maybe even. So we could be, if it was medieval times, we could all be from the same village quite easily.
Indeed.
And yet we know that Germans are evil, right, Dennis?
Let me just refer you to Krishnamurti's saying, I have his words right here.
I was expecting Khalil Gibran.
Well, that's exactly why I'm giving you Krishnamurti. When you call yourself an Indian or a Muslim or a Christian or a European or anything else, you're being violent. Do you see why it is violent? Because you are separating yourself from the rest of mankind. When you separate yourself by belief, by nationality, by tradition, it breeds violence. So a man who is seeking to understand violence does not belong to any country, to any religion, to any political party or partial system. He is concerned with a total understanding of mankind. That's the one I was referring to earlier. And I would say that is pointing at a way of how to overcome division. And if you really, if I really look at it, then that separation, that division, it comes from where? From mind. It's a mind thing. It's a mental thing. It's not a condition of the heart. There is no division, speaking, acting, being from the heart. I don't perceive that.
Well, and I think because we're so divided in so many different ways, because we've got countries and we've got religions and we've got occupations and we've got all these different things that divide us into smaller and smaller and smaller groups, we are so unaware of what, like, the benefits of, like, peaceful living could actually be, because we just don't even know how to contemplate what the world would be like if we just accepted people as beneficial to us, which, believe it or not, they are. Each individual mind is got the potential
Even if
to
they're
really have
annoying?
a
What if
great
they're
deal of
annoying?
benefit to each one of us. And when it comes to the complexity of the universe, the most complex piece of the universe is like between our ears, believe it or not.
And I feel
So
what does
with
it? Sorry, I was cutting you off.
Well, I would just say, like the people that are in possession of that kind of valuable real estate, wouldn't we like look at them as being beneficial, like each one as being like a new adventure to be discovered, like what could potentially come out of that infinite amount of complexity?
I was saying, what does it look like? What does it mean to practice unity then? To practice unity on all levels was what we talked about earlier. That's like a mental thing, or even the quote from Krishnamurti is like he's pointing at also how to, if it's a mental process that creates division on a mental level, then surely there are thoughts and there are processes on a mental level that can, that we can follow in order to overcome and mentally see, maybe there's, it doesn't have to be like that, and we can have intellect, we can use our intellect to overcome division on that level. But what does it look like if you live that on a daily basis? What does it look like if you live unity on a physical level? Obviously, there's uniting physically, with your loved one, but then, what does it mean to, on a physical level, to relate to children, to relate to your children, to other people's children, to, to the guy who sits down beside you in the bus on the way to work? What does it mean to unite in our physical realms and emotionally as well? Because if we all that, then, let's live that. And how can we live unity on a daily level, on all levels?
Well, I think we had a little bit of introduction to that when Shambhavi came on, and it was this idea of acceptance. When it comes to dividing, it's usually that premature judging that leads to all the kind of confusion and division and trouble. Whereas if we were much more accepting, then there'd be less things. Because actually Agnieszka and I and Jennifer were sitting on the couch yesterday, and they were calling me a skeptic because I was saying, well, what's this?
You're a
What's that?
skeptic.
But
That's why.
my feeling is like, haven't you made a judgment a little bit too quick based on
Actually,
information?
let me quote myself. Let me quote
Cloudy?
myself. What I said yesterday was this: Michael is such a skeptic that he doesn't actually believe the sun rises in the east because he hasn't been to the east and he hasn't ridden the sun all the way across the sky to tell you that it comes from there and goes there. So all he can tell you is that there's a visual representation that looks like the sun, but he cannot tell you if the sun actually exists. How do you feel about that, Michael?
I would say that just based on the evidence that I can collect myself, that's where I'm at. But what I would say is that unless you've got an explanation that has that creates a better opportunity for me, then I'm really not interested in like making a judgment about what it actually is. So I basically just allow myself to reserve that judgment to a later date. And so I'm just not making a judgment.
Shambhavi, what are your words of wisdom when it comes to divide and conquer? Can you write us a sentence that will blow our minds? Sure you can.
Yeah. And how would we address that pure mature judgment about Germans in particular?
my judgment about Germans.
Well, it might be like, what are you interested in? If you're like interested in like stargazing or something like that, there's probably some Polish people that are very excited about stargazing too. And why would you separate yourself from people that might have a similar interest, that might blow your mind with like what they've been able to find from the other side of the mountain over there, or the other side of the imaginary line, that might give you some more information that might say, oh, you know, we can see the stars 10 times better over here because we're on a higher ground, that, you know, that, or there's less lights over here, so we can see better over here.
You see, if the experience,
So
if you're separating yourself, and if that experience is, you know, what brings you joy, or what brings you the teachings that you came here to receive, then it's okay with me. But if not, then why do it?
I can tell you guys about my experience with Germans, because it's kind of fun. So as a child, I was taught that Germans are evil, all of them, even the children, and that they're obviously out to get us. And I mean, the person who taught me that, totally legit. She suffered, right? She suffered during World War II. Her brain was not totally there. And so she basically instilled that in me as a child, but I wasn't, like, I was never totally on board with it. I was just kind of like, okay, so I have to be careful about Germans. And then when I first came to Canada, I had this friend named Sabine, and she was German, and she was an exchange student, and we became like really close friends during the year that she was here.
Until you find out she was a German.
No, I knew she was a German the whole time. But I remember distinctly one moment sitting at school, like eating lunch with her and going, she's not evil. She's just a regular girl, just like, and I was 16 at the time, right? She's just a regular girl, just like me. She's not evil. And even though she's German, and my brain actually went, wow, even though this girl is German, she's not evil. I wonder if there's other holes in that theory that my grandma taught me. You know what I mean?
No.
And I mean, well, I asked Dennis to be in this team, so you can't say that I don't like Germans. Of course, I thought he was Jamaican at the
Touche.
time. But
see there.
He slid in under the
Under the radar.
I'm just joking. I always knew he was
It's easy.
German.
You know, it's easy to mix up. But those are
Well,
really
with your accent.
those are really interesting moments. I like, you know, I wonder if we can find more of those moments of unity moments, you know, in our life. Where it's like, oh yeah, you know, where you're able to kind of cut through some of the conditioning or some of the
Bullshit.
yeah, you know, that we were taught, and that we adopted ourselves, you know, because of other people, because of I don't know, teachers we had, or because of TV series we watched, or, you know, there's so much conditioning, like, from all directions coming in, and once, you know, we start to develop methods, and that, again, those can be like, there's processes, there's methods of deprogramming, of cutting through, you know, those conditioning programs. But then there's also, you know, a straight way, you know, through your intuitive how would you say, knowing, so, or feeling, and through, you know, your heart level, basically feeling with the heart, or through your intuition, where you also can get valuable results, and learn to discern, you know, is it separation, is it division that's going on, or is it unity based?
Well, if you know that divide and conquer is happening, you know, and certainly like with the United States right now, you've got, you know, the place pretty much divided 50-50, where you got half the people wanting
Red versus blue.
yeah, wanting the Democrats or wanting the Republicans or whatever. But you know, like if you look at, like, for me, I also was, you know, as an American, like all of our movies and stuff like that were the Americans fighting the Germans, or the Americans fighting the Japs. And when I was, you know, 18 years old, I got shipped off to Germany. You know, of course, we're fighting the Russians now, or the Soviets at that point. And so now we've befriended the Germans. But to some degree, my expectations of like going to Germany were that
God, they have good beer. No?
well, no, actually they told us that they didn't have cold beer. They like drank their beer warm, and it's like, what?
Because Germany itself is cold, we don't need to.
They still have good beer.
But in any case, I got to actually like find out what Germans were. And it was definitely not what I expected, by far. In fact, a lot of the culture that I had from the United States, when I started comparing it to the Germans, I was like, wow, why do we do it so screwed up in the United States when it's so, so much more logical? I mean, like the road system, for example, in Germany, when I was there in the late 80s, was incredibly efficient. It was just it was so much smarter than the way that I saw
Efficient
it in
is
the
the
United
German's
States.
middle name.
And then when I came back to the United States, it was like my head was exploding every time I went down the road. And I was just like, oh, why is that? Oh, why are they doing that? So idiotic.
That's funny. When I came to North America, my head was exploding because of the ingredients on things. Why do they need 40 ingredients to make jam? It should only take 3. Like, why? Why? Oh, back then, 7-Up used to have preservatives in it and stuff. Why does 7-Up have to have this many ingredients? And then several years later, they were like, yeah, we've revisited 7-Up. We don't need all these ingredients. It actually only needs a few. I knew that all along, not that I drink it, but you know what I mean? It was a thing.
We have a comment.
So, but
is it Shambhavi? Is she going to give me the answer to life, universe, and everything?
It's from Dale. It's for a few minutes back. It says he wrote, sounds like Marxists. Ideally, I'm not sure if you meant ideologically it works in your head, but physically it doesn't work. I think that refers to what we talked about a few minutes ago, right? On the different levels, on the mental, physical, emotional level. Yeah, I mean, like on a intellectual level, we can we can make a lot of things work that in reality, don't seem to manifest as sometimes our wishful thinking or our manipulation. Some of those things are a pure manipulation as well, and I think, and that can be seen on a very large scale, that we have been mentally manipulated and programmed to adhere to certain beliefs. From drinking things with too many ingredients to political agendas that are not really based in unity and in love, I would say.
Well, it's like, I'll give you an example. Like, look at John Maynard Keynes, the guy that's the brainiac behind the economic system that we have today that everybody relies on so diligently. He was a blatant eugenicist, and certainly, would be like a hardcore Nazi. But no one seems to notice, no one seems to give a damn about that. And yet we utilize his information and his, supposedly brilliant, foundation of economics to run the world. But if anybody was to look into like his background, one might see that like he was completely a guy that was divide and conquer kind of mentality. And why don't we
so I know that so you're correct, we shouldn't use methods that cause division and lack of unity, right? But at the same time, when you were talking about the guy's pedigree, I was kind of disagreeing with you, because I was thinking, that's the age-old Wagner thing, right? Wagner was a Nazi, therefore we shouldn't enjoy his music. But I don't
what I'm saying
with that.
though is that he kind of he gets the our side treatment. Well, he was on our side, so that's the good guys, and so we just give him the good guy treatment. And even though he basically exemplifies all the things that were the bad guy that were on the enemy side, and so we like, how in the hell does that work? So like, should we? But the guys that are doing the bad stuff that are on our side, so like there's that obscuration of like, what are the true values that also get diminished by divide and conquer too. So like like, people that are like moral people that are doing the right thing are kind of mixed in with the people that are the bad people that are doing the bad stuff, because we've created that train of thought that says these are the good guys and those are the bad guys.
How do you know who the bad guys are?
Well, that's the problem, and I think that's what ends up happening with everybody is we end up being corrupted, and we don't know who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, and that's why we end up in wars and stuff.
It comes right back to what we talked towards the beginning of the show, which is the division into different segments, into different blocks, political parties, races, what have you, and also the division of we touched upon that on the educational system, and the fact that most of us, that's from my perspective, are not able to envision or to imagine a world that has a different financial system, a different political system, like a different way of living together, a more peaceful and harmonious way. So if you never learn that there actually is an alternative, that there are other ways, some of them have been even practiced and lived. It's just that that you were not taught them in school and you haven't heard about them, and unless you purposefully go for them, it will be very difficult actually to come across them. And even then it's going to be difficult for you to believe, because you have been led to believe that that's the only way it works. And if these guys are not there, then it's going to be chaos and it's going to be murder and mayhem in the streets. And so there's so much conditioning and so much ignorance, and we are part of that as well, because you cannot blame the other again. That's a separation again, for not teaching you, for not exposing you. But there's also a choice by you. Like if you choose freedom, if you choose unity, if you choose love every moment of your life, what does that mean? How would you have to posture then? How would you physically have to live your life? How would you mentally choose your point of observation, your perspective? How would you choose to posture on all those levels that we are? And if you look at it from that view, and over to and then overcome basically the conditioning, because there's possibilities, and there are people right here and right now that have overcome that conditioning.
Right, but because there's such large groups that are willing to allow those kind of inconsistencies to be part of their identity, they end up, essentially identifying anybody that's outside those two as the enemy as well. So even though, like, for example, maybe a lot of people would identify that they would consider themselves capitalist, as opposed to communist, right? But if capitalists include John Maynard Keynes, then what have they actually associated themselves with? Have they associated themselves with people that are eugenicists? So like when they call themselves capitalist and they're in a crowd of maybe communists that say, oh, those evil capitalists, those are the people that are geneticists, or those are the people that hate hate particular races of people. The capitalists aren't going to think that, right? But for the other side, that's a reason to hate the capitalists.
You see that
probably genuine, right?
So the ultimate divide and conquer.
They're probably genuinely, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The ultimate divide and conquer, it cuts through all of that, right? The capitalist, the communist, the whatever. It's the ability to see that the ultimate divide and conquer is right there within yourself. If you're unconquered and if you're undivided within yourself, then there could be a capitalist, a communist, a Marxist, whoever sitting beside you, and he could be like a eugenicist, and they could be going on about their views as much as they want, but you'd be still able to perceive that there's something. It could be the bad triggered one. It could be the bad guy, the very bad guy, and the,
you
the good
wouldn't
and the
be
bad
triggered. You wouldn't be
nuances.
offended. You didn't want to slap him in the face.
I don't know. I would have to live through that. What would happen to me? It's a would and could and should.
Well, I think you would. I think there would be the opportunity to see the other person as a person and be able to like listen to what they are really aspiring to, or what their principles are. That somewhere down the line, maybe you might have a disagreement, but for the most part, I would say that most people have like 99.9% of the stuff that they're worried about or think is important are probably the same or in common.
You see, if that's a
And so
manifestation of source as well, then what is he, what is she there to teach me? What does that mean for my own path? Like, how can I posture myself? How can I interact or not interact? Sometimes it is also to know whom not to deal with or how to posture. That doesn't mean you have to hug and agree with everything, but sometimes you meet some people and you have to learn how to keep your guard up and protect yourself or protect others from it. But it is all I always try to posture myself and try to look at it as don't see it, not to see it so emotional and so personal, because to see it personal, then it's like you get sucked into the the this and the that and the finger pointing and you this and you that. But then
Right.
if you can retain like at least a part of you to look at it from an over personal view, like something that's beyond the personhood. It doesn't really matter if what skin color he or she has or what size or where he comes from or if he's this or that political
Or if
party.
they have feet that are too big. Some people's feet too big. You can't be friends with them.
Well, that would be judgmental. The fact that you say they're too big is
What about thick
indicating that you're
ankles?
judging.
No, I don't really believe anybody's feet are too big. I was just using this as an example of preposterous ways to divide ourselves.
Even thick
But
ankles, they
it's
go
a
well
thing.
with thick aunties. Pam is agreeing with me. Okay, Pam,
like
and hi,
that.
Pam.
I like that. No, but I'm serious. When I was a child, it was like a thing. Oh, my feet are this side. Oh, your feet are what? My cousin got a lot of that, and her feet are really large. She's also really tall and skinny, but she has a hard time getting shoes, and she used to get all these looks like, you have what feet? Like it matters what shoes you wear,
Right. But I would say, in regard to the idea of like the emotional response, the emotional trigger that comes about, those are certainly one of those areas that I think are more than likely indicators of conditioning. Because if somebody says a word or describes a certain piece of part about you, and there's an emotional response to that probably suggests that there's some conditioning going on, and that's something to to really examine closely to find out what is actually going on. Because like in a lot of cases, we're blind. We've always been Polish. That's where we were growing up. We're Polish. So then suggesting that well, the Poles are bad, or the Poles do this wrong, or that's going to immediately get you
How dare
upset.
you? Thousands of years of rebellion.
But did they actually call themselves Polish, or was it something else? I mean, like was it like their family name, or like what were they proud of? Because in a lot of cases,
it's funny
for the
because
thousands of years, they probably didn't even think of themselves as Polish, right?
there's even a
Probably thought of
debate
themselves
as to where that name
Horse
came
people.
from. Well, Pole. So the word pole could mean a field, but it could also mean like an energetic field, like a vortex, energetic vortex. So it's most commonly translated as the people of the hill, of the fields, and there are fields in Poland, so that is possible. But then thinking about the Vikings also in one translation are the people of the vortex, and that made me think that maybe Europe was more united than we thought, and maybe we were the people of the vortex. However, whatever that meant in our belief systems, and maybe all of Germany and Poland and Russia and Sweden and whatever was like the people of the vortexes. But I'm probably just speculating. What I'm saying is that we don't even know why we're called the Poles, as opposed to Lehites, or whatever. So, yeah,
You have the North and the South Pole. And
there is that too.
in German it's called Polen, which is Poland, and we have the North Pole and South Pole. I'm not sure if it's related, but it just came to mind.
Yeah, and there's one legend that Polish people came from the North Pole,
There you
right?
go.
They came from the north, so that could be why they're called poles. It doesn't have to be the fields, but who knows, right? Who
And
knows?
Pam is saying that
Pam?
yeah, Pam is saying that it suggests, and that was I'm just cutting in because it relates to what we said a while ago. It suggests that you have work to do on yourself. And she also adds that generalization is a tool in the divide and conquer strategy for sure. And I'd add to that, that's like what we said earlier, right? That when you divide and conquer, you put people like, there's the left, there's the right, and there's the ups, and there's the down, there's this, and there's that. And that puts them in camps, and so they can be easier controlled, right?
Right. With the idea that both of those trains of thought are going to arrive at a destination that's the same. That they're being done. This is being done for a purpose, and that in the end, the fact that you're divided is really working for the people that have actually created the division for a reason that they're getting. So it doesn't matter if you're on the left side or the right side. You're heading towards where they want you to go. So it doesn't matter if you're if you're divided, you're following the plan.
Yeah. If shoes were clues, then I would walk backwards. LOL. That's what Dale is adding.
That's probably a good point. Yeah.
Or walk on your hands.
But, I was going to say I'm from Indiana. The biggest thing in Indiana is the Indianapolis 500, and the most important position in the Indy 500 is the pole position, which is the first position. The car that's the fastest gets the pole position. What does that mean? That the pole is the most important place? I mean,
I don't know. Do they mean like a North Pole or a South Pole, or is it an actual like stick in the ground?
Well, it's the first. The pole position is the first.
But maybe it's closest to the pole. Not the pole, but like a pole.
Well, it's what everybody else wants, but only one can get it.
That's true about Poland. Have you ever played Risk? Everybody wants Central Europe. No one can ever hold it.
It's those Polish people again trying to conquer the world over and over
No,
again.
it's because Europe is surrounded from each side, and it's really easy to take from Africa, from North America, you know what I mean? And that's why in Risk it's hardest to hold Europe. Of course, being European, when I play Risk, I often grab Europe, hold it, and never win the game because they just hold Europe.
I don't know. I think Middle East is probably the most key position in Risk because it connects Africa, Europe, and Asia.
And then you can move into Asia.
Having that one means you screw everybody else as far as getting their their points for controlling a continent.
Pam is asking, what about Kamchatka? That's kind of surrounded by a lot of places too.
Well, Kamchatka is
I don't think that's a thing in Risk. Racing Accents now also for board games. It is Kamchatka. I can't remember the board.
Kamchatka is next to Alaska.
Tell Europe. Oh, on the other side, the bank straight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
But talking about where Dennis was going with the idea of unity, that's foreign to us. That's been completely obscured from our reality because we've been so conditioned with divide and conquer that being at peace with other people, seeing what the benefit of that is, and the fact that it is so great and we don't realize it, really does suggest that this division is sucking the life out of us, sucking the potential out of each one of us, because we're not we're not in a situation where we're surrounded by people that are trying to lift us up. That just does not exist in our world. It's like threats everywhere. We're, in our society, but the reality is that, we should have a tribe of people around us that are our advocates, that are like building us up, that are like helping us develop our greatest strengths, because they see that as being super valuable to the rest of us.
But hold on, are you saying that those huge benevolent organizations like the United Nations and others of like mind are not actually for unity and for peace and stuff? They're saying that a lot, though. Isn't it like
No, I would.
all peace and unity, and so if we all like eat the same food and have the same ideology and look up to the same leaders and stuff, isn't that like what we're looking
And
for?
wear the same
and
dresses and the same shoes and go
pay
to the
them
work
taxes for carbon
and go to
carbon
work
stuff,
in the
because
car in the quarry together, held by a chain. No.
well, I think if you look at the UN's record as far as like promoting peace, the first two experiments were the Congo in Africa and Israel in the Middle East, and those have been just constant wars, just constant conflict. So if that's any example of where they're headed,
Well,
that's
they
it.
Doesn't matter where they're headed. Where are we headed?
I would say the opposite direction.
Like
Actually
a tug of war.
identifying why peace is, well, I mean, the thing is that like we're so indoctrinated to being at odds with each other that we can't even demonstrate how wonderful peaceful existence could be.
Because as soon as you try to have peace, then one is Polish, the other one's German, and you can't have peace after all.
So there's no
No,
peaceful
there's just-
coexistence in diversity, isn't it? That's just too much.
No, too much.
I don't think diversity is the problem. I think it's just that attitude of like
It's because your feet are too big.
looking for the
I'm sorry.
critical differences rather than the critical things in common.
Oh, so we're not supposed to look for differences.
Well, we can look for differences, but what we're looking for, what we could really benefit from is like finding out what we have in common and what we're interested in.
The differences is
and
kind of
why
like the
that might
spice.
be important.
Yeah, it's like when you travel from one. Isn't that why you travel, or why you would travel usually? To go see something different, to see see people, different cultures, different languages, and if you choose so, if you like so, and that doesn't mean you have to, put down or put your own background and culture and ways of life up, or it's just to mean that there's something else, but you can, like you just said, Mike, and like we said earlier too, you can find what unites you with those who might look, talk, and live differently. That doesn't mean you have to accept everything or put down or uplift everything that they do.
Right.
I came to
like
Mexico.
well, certainly that's one. I mean, the fact that I'm here in Mexico and like every day I'm just like, oh man, I just love this place so much because there's so many positive things. And like everybody else is going, what are you, like the people that are here every day, they're going, huh, what? There's great things about us that we don't know about. Yep. There's a whole bunch, but that's the same thing that you experienced when you went to Jamaica, wasn't it? Like you came with a different perspective, and the fact that you could see valuable things in each of those people, and that you had to kind of teach them that, hey, it's not so bad. Look at this, look at that, look at these things, look at the resources you've got over here.
And there's a lot of interesting situations, but I remember one that was a reoccurring one when, because I had not studied, like read a lot and informed myself about Jamaican culture, and then through music, Jamaican music, which I love a lot, and then sometimes I would end up like sitting on the ground under the tree with the children after a session, after class, and was like, okay, and then who this is and who that was, and Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley, and they were like, no, and sometimes they knew, sometimes they didn't, and I was like, well, it's like, what about Bob Marley? What did he say? What did he sing about? Oh, oh yeah, and he was this. And, oh no, I don't know. But who is he? And where? It's like, you don't have to love him or whoever I was talking about. Like a personality in Jamaican history and culture. But it's good to know about them because it's your history, it's your culture, it's where you come from, so it's part of your identity. And it's good to know about. That doesn't mean you have to love them or you have to, agree to everything they did or they said, but it's good to know about it. And it's good to know about other people as well. And I feel about that too, it's not because I'm, I was born on this side of the planet that I have to, follow everything that is done here or say that's great or that's the best. But I can accept that.
You're not supposed to be into Bob Marley. You're supposed to be into Goethe and people like that.
You mean Goethe?
David Hasselhoff.
Yeah, exactly.
Not for you, David Hasselhoff. Yeah.
I've been looking for freedom. Like with one of those orange, plastic things swimming in the water, saving good-looking girls.
But that's a perfect example to me. Is like when you come from a different culture and you're able to like see something valuable in other people that they can't see in themselves, and that like sparks that potential. Like now you're conveying to them that advantage that they have that they can't see. You doing that brings about value, like, wow, they start to see their potential. They start to see that, they can grow potential based on the fact that you brought them information that they otherwise didn't know. That's what we can do for each other every single day. And the more that we get to know each other, the more that we get to understand each other, the more potential we have to convey to each other through understanding. In fact, there's a couple quotes that I have from Bruce Lee. One is, take no thought of who is right or wrong or who is better than, be not for or against. Just the idea that, playing the game of divide is really not conducive to like living good. The other is to know oneself is to study oneself in action with another person.
It's true. It's like, it is that adversity and differences, they really can bring out, they potentially bring out unity if you don't use it as an excuse for separation, for violence. And that is pretty much the choice. If you're asking in the title of the show, what do you choose, division versus unity, then that is the ultimate choice. And there's freedom in that again, because if we are aware of that choice, then, we can point our finger and say, what is he doing? That's total foolishness and whatever. Or you can say, oh, wow, he did that. I don't really agree with that. But I also know him as, a loving father and this and that. So you can choose, to learn something even from people who are, very different or under adverse circumstances, or you can choose to, to judge and to put them down and to divide through that as well.
It was this thing on Facebook today that I thought was really interesting. It was some article some doctor wrote, right? And it was a controversial article, right? So people were commenting underneath, and then one person said, oh, he's not really a doctor. He sells vitamins. So, it's not like he's a real doctor. And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, what he sells doesn't have anything to do with his education. Like, what kind of a fallacy? Like, how deep a fallacy are you in? Oh, he sells vitamins, so he's not a real doctor. First of all, like, does he sell vitamins, or does he own a manufacturing facility, or does he, you know what I mean? Like, there are so many ways to sell vitamins, and he could be devising, he could be working in a lab creating the vitamins, right? And that would make him a chemist and, a pharmacist or whatever, pharmaceutical, whatever. Anyway, it was full of fallacies. There was no context in there. It's like saying, oh, she likes pottery, therefore you can't listen to her when she talks about cooking a roast. You know what I mean? It was just so random.
We have a question.
Oh, no.
Don is asking,
Hi, Don.
Where can I learn this skill to see the superpowers in others?
It's not.
Ah,
Well, so I have an answer. Any skill takes 20 hours to build, right? And that means that you would have to spend 20 hours walking around identifying the superpowers in others and ignoring the things you disagree with.
I thought he was asking for a commercial for ethical emergence, but I'll
Oh,
stop.
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think that is kind of one of the things that I try and pull off with ethical emergence is I really try to identify people's strengths, or certainly I introduce them to their own strengths, and then start to really incorporate those into an individual's daily practices that where like when you identify a strength that you have that you may or may not know or may not really be familiar with, but once you start employing that on a daily basis, you start to see that in yourself much more clearly. Similarly, if you can do that for other people, that's also something that you can benefit from. And I think, those of us that have been through autonomy, what Richard's talking about is really starting to get to know each other better. But as you really start to become acclimated to living in a peer-to-peer environment, it's really the benefit of like knowing enough people that know enough stuff that they can basically get everything done that needs to be done, and you know them well. Then any person you meet, you've got a solution for them, because I don't know, they need to eat something, we've got that covered. Do they need something fixed? Well, we got that covered. Do they need something improved? We probably got that covered too. And so like when you associate yourself with a great deal of people that are capable of doing a lot of things, you've got solutions for everybody. I guess you could be considered kind of angelic, because you can just go around solving people's problems and like making their day because you've got all the answers. That's kind of what ethical emergence kind of
I would add that
embodies. Maybe that's the vision.
I would add that
Go
That's
ahead.
pretty good.
it is this to see the superpowers in others. I would say look with your eyes, look with your guts, look with your heart,
Listen to the parrots
and with your mind as well.
screeching.
You see?
They're
So
definitely
sometimes you can't see the superpowers with your eyes, but if you look from your heart, or if you look from your guts, then you'll find. And maybe if even after all of that you don't see any of them, maybe that person, that human being, was put in your way for you to help them to see their own superpowers. Or maybe it was, maybe it was for you to share some of yours. Who knows? Or maybe it was just, for you to recognize that, oh wow, maybe it's
You
not
know
for
what
me
the
to look
most
even deeper.
common fallacy is in the world, and this happens to a lot of people before they're 40, and then at 40 it seems to resolve itself a lot of the time, is people think that their talents are the same as everybody else's. Of course everybody can do this. Of course everybody can do this. I'm not special. Everybody can do this. Then you reach 40 and you realize that no, other people can't do the same stuff you can, and even if they do it differently. So
yes.
like
Yeah.
I used to think that everybody could write. Anybody could write an ad for their own business. Why would they need to hire me?
You
it's
don't want to give them
amazing.
your contact?
Not
Don is
this
adding,
week.
Yeah, it's
I think when people find a hidden strength, this can create an island of self-esteem in a sea of doubt. This might get the ball rolling towards self-ownership, which serves all of us. Yeah.
Maybe we should get Don as
Yeah.
as a guest on here. I love to hear more about the islands of, what was it?
Of
Island
self-esteem
of
in a sea of
self-esteem
doubt.
in a sea of doubt. That's so poetic. You should write a poem about that for the next Renaissance
Hoorah.
Revolution.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we are pretty much out of time, but
And out of light.
what what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday is really kind of the finding the gold in understanding that conflict is really like an investment. It's a way that we can invest our time in understanding other people. And certainly one of the best ways to do that is really to take conflict and start to understand what is actually behind conflict. Because in most cases, we start to really gain value, because when conflict happens, that's really the most important thing that we could potentially do is resolve conflict and identify value.
So that's why the show. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, most people are being taught to run away from conflict, and that in itself is an incredibly valuable thing. For those people that can face conflict, become peacemakers, there's a ton of value.
And that's why the show on Wednesday is going to be called The Gold Mine of Conflict.
Ross is seconding the motion for having Don on, and Don is saying, "Oh, me blushing. Gotta go to a meeting now, guys. Thanks." Yes, man.
Bye,
It'd be
Don.
great to talk to you soon.
We're taking off too. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate your time and attention, and I hope that you learned something from our conversation, and that you will have some conclusions of your own.
Absolutely.
Well said.
It doesn't end with us. It just gets started. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible out there. And certainly you can carry that a lot further yourself.
Well
And
said.
with that said,
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. Blessed love
Wednesday
until
at
Wednesday.
4:30 Central,
Yes, give thanks for your
5:30
time.
Eastern, 11:30 p.m. in Germany.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being with us.